This is my leader.
There you go.
And I'm ambitious for him.
Yeah, good on you. Thanks, Gomo.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. I will not.
Did he knock back the crystal? I don't think so.
So we have a very clear plan for jobs and growth.
Today on Jobs and Growth, we're joined by Gideon Rozner, former political commentator, former mob president, and a former Young Liberal president. He's one of Australia's most recognisable voices on public policy and freedom, representing Australians in Australia on Tucker Carlson Tonight and across print, radio and television. Gideon has spent years advocating for lower taxes, smaller government and a more prosperous and agile Australia. Previously serving as Director of Policy at the Institute of Public Affairs, Gideon has a deep understanding of how policy decisions shape enterprise, jobs and growth. His work has made him a prominent figure in Australia's economic debate, known for combining strong policy principles with a clear and compelling delivery. Gideon, welcome to Jobs and Growth.
Thank you so much. Great to be here, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. Great to join a couple of young people in the party, a good Malka and a good YL. Yeah, fantastic to be here, and good to be podcasting again. It's been a while.
No, thanks for agreeing to come on. Really appreciate it. Means the world. So in the intro, talked a bit about Young Liberals and Malk.
Yeah.
You don't need to be nice on Lockie's behalf, but what do you reckon's better, Malk or the Young Liberals?
Oh, Malk.
Oh,
100% Malk.
I knew that. He was like, Georges, you don't get it. If you've been in the Malk, you understand it. Yeah.
So Malk, by the way, for those uninitiated, is the Melbourne University Liberal Club, obviously. And look, I mean, my story is that I was a political nerd from the age of 13 or something. I joined the Liberal Party on my 16th birthday. Clearly, I was the coolest kid on the playground. And look, I went to a few branch meetings. I handed out how to vote cards. I did all that. I quite enjoyed it. If I'd left it there, maybe I would have lost interest. Maybe I wouldn't have. But then I've always said that the sliding doors moment of my life was, I was in high school. I wanted to do law because law is what a Jewish boy does if he can't stand the sight of blood. I didn't know why I wanted to do it, and I probably shouldn't have done it, but nevertheless, that's what I wanted. And at the time, it was back in the day when they had law undergrad at Melbourne. And to get into law undergrad at Melbourne, it was something stupidly high, like 99.4 or whatever. So I didn't even bother putting it on my preferences. And for various reasons, I actually did get it and changed it. And as I said, that was the great sliding doors moment of my life, was getting into Melbourne University and going to the Malk. I mean, I was, I'd gone to a Jewish school growing up in Toorak. I'd had a pretty sheltered life. But when I joined the Malk, the world just completely opened up and, really turbocharged. I mean, firstly, I'll get into that in a second, into the kind of training you get in the art of politics, the camaraderie, the friendships. I mean, half of my bridal party years later were people I met through the Malk and Wales and things like that. But, James Patterson obviously has gone a very long way since. He was my vice president. We became best friends. We joined in our OE together. But, look, I understand you've got a lot of you may have some high school students, who are watching and are umming and ahhing as to what university they go to, if indeed they go to university at all. I'm the first to say, go to Melbourne, join the Malk. It is the best thing you'll ever do. And it's been the frustration of my life in the 15 years since I graduated, which is I meet a good young kid interested in politics. At high school, I say, go to Melbourne, join the Malk. It's the best. Well, no, I want to do engineering and science at the same time, or engineering and law. Like, no, you don't. No, you don't. That's stupid. Go to Melbourne Uni. Why would you drive to Monash Park, drive back? You want to take the train into Melbourne Uni. You want to go out in the city. I fell so in love with the city during those years at Melbourne Uni that I ended up living there for 10 years on Spencer Street after I graduated. The two institutions that made me who I am, in no particular order, are the IPA and the Malk. The Liberal Party I spent 20 years in, and I've just applied to rejoin. Yes. But there is nothing compares to the Malk. It is just a one of a kind institution, and again, not just political education, but it changes you. Hopefully for the better, but that depends on who you ask.
Tell us the story about how you became president of the Malk, how you go from being a regular member, going to getting plastered on campus every Monday to becoming president.
That's a terrible behaviour. I wouldn't recommend that at all. Well, look, so what happened to me? It was when I joined. Brent Crockford was the president, the outgoing president, and we became fast friends pretty quickly. And then Andrew Campbell was the president, so I was a first-year committeeman under him. And then Dixon was the president, and I was his magazine editor. And, you know, in any voluntary organisation, the president ends up doing 80% of the work. What happens then is you get the ambitious person sort of waiting in the wings who helps and does an extra 10-15%. So that was me. Dixon supported me, and it was a very competitive AGM, as they all are in Mulk. Just kidding, I was elected unopposed. That'll happen. And then I just took that and went with it and ran student election campaign that went pretty well. And I was a good Mulk president.
So now these days you're all on X?
Yeah, well, I did the commentary. I did just about everything in politics except achieve elected office. But the most recently I was at the IPA, and in that I'm a political commentator more or less. And I did Sky. I wrote for op-eds, wrote op-eds for newspapers. I did a few other bits and pieces. But these days, look, I'm back in the private sector. I'm yesterday's hero in a lot of ways. But one thing I do believe in is X as a platform. I think what Elon did has absolutely it saved the world by unclogging that artery of free speech.
Well, have you ever been on Blue Sky? Obviously, the competitor of X. I got an account on it the other day.
Oh yeah,
it's so much stupid shit you'll ever see.
I'll bet it is. but that's the thing, you know. Now the trots are starting to build their own like Blue Sky in reaction to X. The same thing that was done by the right for years and years and years. There was Parler, there was Truth Social, there were a few other ones. None of them ever broke through because Twitter, for better or worse, it's just the public square. You can't have half of the conversation shut out. It takes away the magic and what Elon's done is he's effectively made it like the WWE, and he's playing the role of Vince McMahon. Like he is, but it's important that that medium was turned over or became a free speech zone. Doesn't mean that there's not a lot of crap on there, a lot of very confronting stuff. But you know, that's what free speech is. You can't just defend the speech you like.
Yeah, well, I think that segues into a good topic about, and you're obviously from the IPA, libertarian background, is, you know, to what level should we kind of tolerate, you know, very vicious and vitriolic type of speech?
To the maximum extent. The only limits on speech should be the incitement to violence. And even then it has to be direct incitement to violence. It has to be, you know, an imam sitting in a mosque saying, I want you to go out tonight and throw a Molotov cocktail at a synagogue. That's the level of direct incitement. Just saying something may encourage violence, even that falls short. Defamation law I've always opposed on, well, not always, but I came to oppose on a free speech grounds and also on an access to justice grounds, because only the wealthy can afford to go to defo court to either sue other wealthy people or to sue some poor journalist who doesn't have a pot to piss in and ruin their life. And when I was at the IPA had a defamation policy. I actually took out my own on top of that because I was paranoid and because I like to defame people. I'm just kidding. No, look, free speech is all we have, and you can't pick and choose. You can't say, well, that's hate speech. That's a bullshit argument.
What do you think's the kind of heritage of where all these views of yours came from? Did you like pick up John Locke one day and decide yes?
I wish I was that intellectual. No, I mean, I did become through the Mulk and through the IPA and things like that. I guess the IPA really turbocharged it, but fundamentally, I've always been somebody who loves debate. I've always been somebody who loves the battle of ideas. I believe, maybe naively, that we create a better world with the free exchange of ideas. That's how we got to where we are as a species, because, you know, person A could say to person B, hey, check this thing I built, the wheel. Isn't this cool? Great, what if we put this? If we can't communicate with each other, then that hampers not just our right to speech, but our mechanism for developing as a species.
Yeah, people were persecuted for saying the world was round.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, but that's always the case. You know, who decides what the hate speech is? Who decides what? So to answer your question, and this is a live issue, and this is something that a lot of, you know, Jewish people are asking themselves too these days, which is, where does free speech fit into the fact that we live in a very different world? We live in a world, for better or worse, where there's a lot of pent-up energy from decades in which one side of things has said, you can't say that, you can't say that, you can't say that. Now we're in a world where actually, no, now you can say it and people are saying it. The task now is to say, okay, because you can say something, should you, or is it a nice thing to say or a helpful thing to say? Well, no. But fundamentally, we have to put up with speech we hate. We have to put up with speech we don't like. It's very easy to defend speech you don't like. So, again, when Nick Fuentes goes on a rant about whatever the hell, well, okay, that's free speech. I would hope that would be cleared in the battle of ideas and, it'll get a bit hairy, but even so, it can be tempting, but the free speech is fundamentally all we have.
Yeah.
Speaking of Nick Fuentes, and it's kind of a topic we want to broach on, what line, like where do we draw the line between, figures with strong conservative views, someone kind of like yourself based on what a lot of the tweets I've read, and when does a line go to they're unacceptable, like Nick Fuentes, I'd say someone like Tucker Carlson's increasingly getting there.
Well, when you say unacceptable, again, I don't think we can or should make it unacceptable in a regulatory or legal sense. Unacceptable in a social sense, sure. Unacceptable to whom? To, reasonable people. It's certainly unacceptable to me. And Bill Maher, do you guys watch Bill Maher at all? Bill Maher, everybody loves Bill Maher. The left, anybody sensible loves Bill Maher because he's a lefty, but he's a sensible lefty, and he comes at things, he bashes both sides and all the rest. Anyway, he'll talk to anybody, but even he said, look, I won't have Nick Fuentes on my show. The guy's that is, and that's his right to pick and choose who he has on. What's the solution to Fuentes? Well, theoretically, it's to put better and competing ideas out there, but also I'm sorry to say that the phenomenon's here now. Watching Nick Fuentes, it's like watching Hitler in the beer hall. Back in the early days when only a few cranks took him seriously. But history shows this only goes one way. But I have to hand it to the guy. He's very clever. He's very charismatic. He's very articulate. He's a nut. And his idea, I can't decide whether he's sort of coming at it from shock value or where he really believes the kind of shit he gets into. But it's really just a throwback to every anti-Jewish trope we've heard for millennia. The Talmud says this, the killing children, controlling the banks and all this other sort of stuff. It's but look, that's the world we live in. Again, we are relitigating what we can and can't say, not so much in a legal sense, as I said, but in a social sense. And if you go onto X, you not just stuff about the Jews, you find people saying things about black people you couldn't have said a while ago, about Indians and things like that. A lot of it really revolting stuff. At the same time, we're also relitigating things like the Welcome to Country, that's a debate that we should be having. Again, a lot of the time, on the extreme edges, it goes into really nasty and disgusting racism and stuff like that. But fundamentally, there are places for discussions of, should you welcome Australians to their own country? Should you have 3 flags behind the Prime Minister, or just the flag that represents all of us?
We
the
only have
Australian
one flag here at Jobs and Growth.
And here. But again, that's something that's being relitigated. That's something you couldn't have said that prior to the voice referendum or the Trump era. Now we're relitigating things, and a lot of the discussions are going to be really uncomfortable and really bad. We just have to let the process of debate weed them out and take its natural course and strap ourselves in.
Yeah, and I think also outside of politics, like one of the reasons I'm a Liberal is because I think Chris Lee's like the funniest person ever. And I don't think we'll ever get to see many shows of that ilk ever again.
Yeah, but this is the problem. The friends of the ABC types with their bumper stickers out and God knows where. No, but they say, oh, we need Australian content, we need Australian storytelling, we need $1.1 billion a year for a channel to make it. That's a far argument as far as it goes. But when it comes to a firecracker like Chris Lilly, one of the greatest comedians and probably the best character actor in the history of this country.
Probably the greatest TV show other than Bluey.
Yeah. Well, again, it's a good thing Bluey doesn't, have a Samoan character or something in the show, or else he'd be cancelled too. And my son would be very disappointed, I must say. But, so we have these wonderful cultural institutions. It's a good thing Barry Humphries didn't do Dame Edler in the 2020s, otherwise he would have been done for transphobia. So this is the problem when you try to put guardrails around things, especially when you involve the law. The question always becomes, who says? who says what's you can't trust it because it's subjective.
Yeah.
Offence is completely subjective.
Yeah.
So yeah,
We ask this to all our guests, but out of Turnbull, Abbott, and Morrison, who's your favourite and why?
Abbott.
Have you never read Gideon's Twitter?
It's a Tony Abbott Stan account, mate. Like, yeah, well, look, so Tony Abbott, I admired for a very long time, way back till when he was health minister with John Howard. And you know, the first time I realised Tony Abbott is a hell of a guy. Like, it was you're probably too young to remember this actually, but in the early 2000s there was this show, this movie called Super Size Me. And it was a show. It was a stupid documentary. This guy decided to eat nothing but McDonald's every day for like 3 months or a month or something, and lo and behold, he became really unhealthy. And he used that as a platform to say, "Well, McDonald's are poisoning us and all this other shit." And as somebody who loved McDonald's, I mean, I still do, but especially as a bloody teenager, and somebody who was, you know, a liberal and believed in personal responsibility, I was horrified that this crap propaganda was being taken seriously. So basically what happened was Four Corners jumped into the act and said, well, Australian children are obese. And they interviewed the then Health Minister, Tony Abbott. And I remember watching it and, you know, I think it was, who was it? That British lady who's the host of Four Corners. And she sat down with Abbott. No, not Lee Sales.
Sarah Ferguson.
Sarah Ferguson, I think it was. And she would like ask Abbott all these questions about the crisis of childhood obesity. And he didn't give an inch. She'd ask, so, Minister, why is it that Australian children are getting fatter? And he'd say, well, I'd imagine it's because they're eating more and exercising less. I'm like, well, Minister, shouldn't the Australian government, parents should not be feeding their children Coca-Cola for every meal. Like, just talking about personal responsibility and the freedom to do what you want and raise it. I'm like, yes, finally.
Yeah.
So then, of course, we had the Liberal Party went into opposition and Tony Abbott, and this segues into the carbon thing, which I'm sure we'll discuss, but, you know, there was this terrible period in which you had Kevin Rudd trying to ram through an emissions trading scheme on the one hand and Malcolm Turnbull on the other hand saying, yeah, get it through. And at the time I was actually working part-time for a senator. I was at university, but I worked a couple of days a week for a senator, and that job was answering phones, Coro as they call it, correspondence. And the flood of anti-ETS correspondence, I've never seen anything like it. And it was a great lesson because it showed the disconnect between the polite opinions of the landed class. You know, the media was talking about it as a fait accompli. It was not a question of if, it was a question of how. You know, are we going to put concrete smelters into it or aluminium or whatever, and, you know, all this other, the minutiae of how this thing would work. But it wasn't until Abbott had the courage to get up and actually challenge Turnbull, taking notice of what the grassroots were saying, that the Liberal Party had a fighting chance. And he destroyed all the argument about, again, carbon caps and limits and who would get vouchers and credits and all this other crap. Abbott just demolished the whole thing with 6 simple words. It was a great big new tax on everything. And he became leader, shut it down, and the Liberal Party polling instantly recovered. The next few polls, I was doing a clerkship at the time when he became leader at a law firm with lefty law students. And at the start of the clerkship, Abbott rolled Turnbull. And all these lefty, you'll never win with Tony Abbott. He's terrible and sexist and all the rest. I'm like, oh yeah, well, we'll see. By the end of the clerkship, they weren't laughing at me anymore because we were back in. No, we were. And Kevin Rudd until that point was the most popular, according to Newspoll, most popular Prime Minister in recorded history. Abbott demolished it. In 6 months later, he resigned. 6 months after that, a few months after that, Julia Gillard had to govern in the minority. And 3 years later, Abbott won 90 seats. 90 seats. Yeah. No Liberal leader has come anything close. How many do we hold now? 40, 45, something like that? About half. So this idea that Tony Abbott was unpopular, I went out with him when he ended up having something to do with the IPO. We became very good friends. We'd go out in inner city Melbourne. Yeah. And he'd be mobbed there in like lefty land. So Turnbull, look, Turnbull, that was a horrible saga. I think that's probably the Liberal Party's original sin, sticking Turnbull in, because you lost Conservatives basically forever, I think. Yeah. I think that is part of why there's this enormous fragmentation if you look at the polls with the right-wing vote now. And look, it wasn't that Turnbull wasn't as ideological as I thought he'd be or as left-wing as I thought he'd be. He was just politically inept. just like completely useless. You know, he had this ideas boom motif talking about incubation hubs and all sorts of other things that nobody in marginal seats understood or cared about. But more to the point, he wanted to turn the Australian government basically into one big investment bank.
Yeah.
Well, there's a solution for that, Malcolm. Go back to investment banking if you like that. Anyway, and then Morrison came along, and I wanted Morrison to succeed. I really did. I thought at least he's not Turnbull. And he won the election, and I thought, great, he won an election that Turnbull absolutely couldn't have. Great, vindicates the decision to get rid of Turnbull. But he ended up being worse, even worse than Malcolm, because because of Corona. Yeah. And I will never, ever, ever forgive him for making it a criminal offence for Australians to re-enter their own country. It was a criminal offence for Australians in India to come back, effectively rendering them stateless. Bankrolling every lockdown. You know, every one of Dan's lockdowns was paid for by my great-grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. So Tony Abbott, and look, you know, the final point I'll make on Tony Abbott is, was his government as good as it can be? No, and I'm sure he will tell you that he made mistakes. But I'll put it this way: if Andrew Peacock had hung around like a bad smell after John Howard won in 1996 and rolled John Howard in 1998. History would remember John Howard very, very differently. His first two terms weren't much chop, but he was there long enough. You know, and people, they love him now, but I don't remember people loving John Howard all that much. Liberals did, but it was more that people came to begrudgingly respect him because he was there for long enough and he had convictions, and he was a force of stability. If Turnbull had been out of the picture, he would have been, he would have been the next John Howard.
Well, what do you think about Turnbull's recent turn? And, you know, whilst he's not active in the teal movement, his views are very representative of it. He speaks positively towards them. He does events with a lot of teal MPs.
Just the other week in
with Monique,
Hawthorn Town Hall with Monique Ryan.
Look, it kind of proves the point, doesn't it? That he was tealism is his ideology fundamentally, which is the interests of inner city well-off people combined with climate change voodoo, with a few tax cuts thrown in. That's the good part. But the problem is the teals. He didn't really get votes from that section either. All these lefties said, well, I'd vote for the Liberals if Malcolm Turnbull was leader. Oh, really? 14 seats later. Well, so much for that. You know, in the 2016 election, nearly damn well lost government after one term.
So do you think, you know, the political establishment being full of Turnbull-like people, as you said, inner city, wealthy, not really in touch, you know, they're all big fans of all the climate change stuff and, you know, a couple tax cuts here and there, which, as you said, are good. Do you think that's fueled the rise of, hasn't quite hit Australia yet, it's hit all the other Western countries, this populism on the right and even on the left as well?
Well, it has hit Australia if you believe the polls. And if you look, Pauline got, 4 Senate seats? So it is hitting, and it's hitting in a big way. I think that, look, it's a symptom, and people much smarter than I have written miles of newspaper inches about columns about this, which is, I remember back in the 2010s, we used to laugh at Labor because they had a huge problem straddling their two bases, which is the blue-collar sort of outer suburban working class on the one hand and the inner city, you know, dickhead belt on the other, right? And that you know, the Greens on one side and found it difficult to placate the other end. The same things happened to the Liberal Party because, you have people who sort of, I guess, flirt with the teals or a little bit more moderate on certain things on the one side and the outer suburban regional base on the other. And it's hard for the Liberal Party to manage, partly because in a lot of ways the Liberal Party is fixated on the inner city end. And I'm kind of torn whether it's better just to write the Kooyongs of the world off and focus on the other side. I suspect we probably do need to win them back to win government. But at what cost? By focusing on it, by putting together policies that will get you a Kooyong, do you miss out on potentially winning back an Aston, Deakin, Corangamite, Dunkley, places like that? Can you walk and chew gum at the same time? I don't know.
I think you know, at the end of the day, Kooyong and Aston, they all want small government, more efficient.
I don't think
government.
they all want. I disagree on that. I think maybe in Kooyong they want small government. I say Aston is you're full of these I'd say your typical kind of Tony Abbott fan, socially conservative, but also you maybe a big government person as well.
Not public service.
Not public service, but I think that's also an Australian cultural thing as well. I wish that we had the kind of political culture that they had in the US where people talk about blowing up the IRS and things like that. Not physically, don't worry. Don't come for me, AFP. But I think culturally, look, we do have a very strong attachment to the minimum wage. We do have a very strong attachment to public health. Not that I'm against people having access to health, or being paid a decent wage, but the mechanisms to do it, in my mind, as a libertarian, are not statutory minimums or government provision. I mean, the government can't. I wouldn't trust the government with my dry cleaning. Why trust it with health? If the government was in charge of phones, we'd still be using the Motorola flip phone. The government can't do anything. So, and you can't tell me, the health system in this country has been given money hand over fist by both sides of governments at all levels of state, federal and local for as long as I've been alive, and we still have the periodic story about people dying on ramps because they can't get access to a bed. And that's because the government cannot run things as well. The only reason our health care system works half well is because we have the private insurance rebate, which effectively functions as a quasi-voucher system for half of people. But the NHS, you want to wait 15 months to get your shoulder x-rayed? Really? Nah. So, I think, and that was evident in Tony Abbott, and that was another disillusioning thing during the Abbott government, which is he tried to introduce a princely sum of $6 for people to visit the doctor, right? $6. To see a medical professional who's gone to uni for like 8 years. And everybody melted. It was like he'd asked for everybody's firstborn child or something. Everybody was, how dare he make us pay for the doctor?
Yeah, well, that actually pissed me off. This election, May 2022, one of the Alvo's promises was like zero gap Medicare.
Oh, yeah.
And he hasn't done it. He promised it, hasn't done it.
Yeah, but hold on, I can do my best Albanese on the stump. This is your Medicare card. If you take it to a hospital, you can get services. The doctor will see you. Like, honestly, it was so, but like, you guys are young people in politics. Is that the level, are you happy with that being the level of debate? Yeah, an Abbott scheme would have had exemptions for people on New Start and things like that. It would have been capped at 12 visits a year. There were guardrails. Maybe they weren't articulated well enough by the government, but I think people just had an issue that this idea that it has to be completely free under all circumstances. Anyway,
yeah,
we'll see.
So you left the Liberal Party,
yeah,
and that was for a range of things. But
no, well, I was cheesed off with them for reasons I've discussed. I mean, and in fact, in the 2022 election, it was, I think, the only time I preferenced the Labor Party ahead of the Liberal Party. I was that angry.
Wow.
I put the Greens last, but McNamara and Josh Burns, I knew him personally. Yeah. I didn't mind the cut of his jib, so I thought, the hell with it, I'll put because I was that pissed off. But the Camel's back was more redeeming, and it was the final slap in the face to Conservatives and to the right of the party for me. And it didn't happen in isolation. It was I'd seen too many good people kicked out of the Liberal Party, again, because they're intimidated by the chattering classes saying, oh, well, that person's a sexist and a Nazi. No, they're not. Look, we'll boot them out, see? And it was wrong when they did it to Moira. It was wrong when they did it to Bernie Finn. It was wrong when they did it to Tony Abbott. I'd seen too many people. And the other thing is, the thesis was always, look, we don't always love the Liberal Party for everything it does, but they're the party of government, they're the best we have, and it's better to be inside the tent changing it from within than the outside pissing it. Fair enough. But Moira showed that you could be elected to the damn parliament and they'll kick you out anyway. So I just quit the IPA. I didn't really have a platform. So the only lever I had to register my disgust was just quitting the party. And I joined the Libertarian Party, which was a great few years. I'm sorry to say the branch meetings are a lot more fun in the Libertarian Party. They're typically at a pub, which is good. So but I've rejoined recently. When Jess Wilson was elected, I went straight down to Do the kids still say 104 or is they call it 257?
257 now, but whenever I'm
Emirates
talking
House.
to one of you old guys, you always still say 104.
Yeah. It's like when somebody calls ABC Radio 3LO or something or Channel 2 or, so whatever it's called these days, I went straight down, put my form in. I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything since, so maybe they lost it, but or conveniently shredded it. I don't know.
I think there's a 45-day mandatory waiting period, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're back.
Well, to support Jess.
Yeah, support Jess,
Because, Jess is, speaking of young Liberals, she was on my Whale exec. I've known her, I would imagine her almost her whole adult life, certainly most of mine. And look, I not only is she a mate and I know her, but I'm a believer in her as somebody who can actually be the best leader we've had in 30 years since Jeff Kennett got the heave-ho. And I've been absolutely vindicated beyond my wildest imagination. I mean, the professionalism she has brought back to the Liberal Party, as soon as she got out of the party room meeting after being voted in, first thing she said to the media, my 4 priorities are fix the budget, fix the crime, fix the hospitals, and make sure people can own their own home. I'm like, yes, great. This is textbook stuff. Putting out a simple platform that people know. She blitzed every media interview she did, and she did a ton of them, right?
Yeah.
She was the first day she was on Channel 9 News, she was on Credlin, she did 3AW, just making sure that she was the first to introduce herself to I've never seen so much coverage of a state leadership change in opposition ever.
She's probably getting more coverage than the Premier.
Yeah. She is. And she has completely reset the agenda too.
Yeah.
Now Labor are playing catch up on the budget because she's bringing everything back to the budget. And that's not an easy thing to do because, the Liberal Party used to go to the election saying, well, we'll protect the AAA credit rating. Nobody cares about people barely know what it is. I only have a vague understanding of what the hell it is, right? But Jess is saying, well, how many surgeries could our interest debt pay? How many schools could that build? Oh, by the way, they spent $200,000 on pot plants. Great. Make it real. Make it tangible. So I think she shows actually she's evidence of how much professionalism you actually build by doing the MOLC or the Young Liberals and doing your apprenticeship in politics and staffing. I know that's a dirty word around some circles. People say, we don't want career politicians and staffers. Oh, great. So just put people who have never done anything political in their lives into Parliament and see what happens.
She spent a lot of time in the private sector as well.
Yeah, she did that too. Of course, has real-world experience, such as it is. But we were talking offline about the calibre of candidates you get who have actually done their time in politics and know politics and know how to put a platform together, know how to speak to the media, know how to spin a message. I think she has a red-hot chance. Look, fundamentally, the circumstances are such. The 2 biggest issues in this state are crime and the economy. Well, those are the only 2 reasons people vote Liberal on a state level. Now, Matthew Guy, I like Matthew Guy. I have a lot of time for Matthew Guy. Great guy, pun intended. But he went to the last election campaigning on health. Health is not a Liberal issue. To paraphrase the American comedian Dennis Miller, we could go back to leaching in Victoria and Labor would still win the debate on health. It's just not an issue because people think, what we were saying earlier, we want more money for hospitals. Labor give away money like it's about to expire. Great, we'll vote. No, so if the Liberal Party can't win either in 1 or 2 terms, our problems are structural, not cyclical. And by that I mean there just might not be enough Liberal Party voters out there anymore. Yeah. And that's scary.
Well, if that's the case, does the party have to change? Does it have to incorporate some of the ideas that are popular with, we've seen in some of the minor parties?
Well, I think they need to do better to not lose votes to the minor right-wing parties. And I think the Liberal Party often has often fallen into the trap of saying, well, we have a preferential system. Even if somebody's a One Nation voter, they have to preference us. They can't not. Well, actually, no, they don't. No, they don't. They don't have to follow a how to vote card. If indeed we're ranked well enough on how to vote cards at all, you do get leakage.
Yeah, I think it's like 70-30, the leakage.
Is that right?
Yeah, for One Nation. It sounds about right.
Yeah.
Sorry, 30 to Labor.
30 to Labor,
Right, so you're getting 0.7 votes for every 1 vote you would otherwise normally get. And you'll get the leakage because people, if they're that pissed off with the Liberal Party, they will preference Labor ahead of the Liberal Party. I've done it. As I just said, I did it myself.
Yeah.
Right? And the other thing is morale. Because if you go to a Liberal Party branch meeting, I think at most places the branch members probably align more with the One Nation view of the world than the teal view of the world, right? So you have to give something to them because they are the people who, you can't just win. Votes are the only thing that determine an election. It is also manpower.
Yeah.
It is people who sell the raffle tickets, hand out the how to vote cards, put on the fundraising functions, who put up the signage, who get up at 4 a.m. to stand outside a polling booth in the freezing cold to make sure that the candidate's sign is at the best possible spot and they don't get edged out. You need to give something to those people because morale sags. And again, I go back to Tony Abbott. He was the evidence of that at a time when everybody was saying, oh, the Liberal Party, they can't go backwards. They can't not be seen to be taking climate change seriously. They'll think we're a bunch of Neanderthals. Tony Abbott said, nah, great big new tax. It's destructive and terrible. The Liberal Party's polling recovered like that. So I think at the last election, for instance, if Peter Dutton had tried to make the election a referendum on migration, he would have had a much better chance. If he led more with, power bills and the nuclear thing, I guess that was probably controversial in the focus groups or something, so they ignored it. But
he didn't really
have
a real policy. He didn't have any one real policy. I felt.
Look, such as they were, his policies were actually very sensible. Like, for instance, vaping, right? A vaping policy that lets grown adults do what they want and results in tobacconists not being firebombed. Yeah. I mean, it sounds pretty good to me. Maybe people are pro firebombing. I don't know, but he didn't showcase those. It was your petrol costs less.
Yeah.
And the petrol station photo ops were not as flashy as your Medicare card photo ops. So he lost. And it's I think he became too risk averse when he needed to become just go for a little bit more, more product differentiation. And he let Labor completely dominate the agenda. Yeah. So, I think it is misguided to say you can just ignore the base or the right, But I think the Liberal Party could solve it like that. And all they need to do to bring some of the base back is to actually go hard on the voice, which they oppose anyway. Because not the voice, the treaty, the voice on steroids.
Well, they're bringing a voice to Parliament as well.
Yeah, all sorts of things. I think the worst thing about it is the education stuff. They should run hard on that, the truth-telling. Teaching kids from before they can walk that this is a racist, terrible country and don't bother. What a terrible thing to be teaching our children, that this is stolen land built on genocide. It is just so ahistorical and ignorant and twisted and wrong. And, I'm a parent now. I mean, my son's far from school age, but, when I grew up, my mother told me, listen to your teachers, study hard, get good marks, go to university. I can't tell my son any of that really now. Listen to your teachers. I'll have to say, well, actually, listen to some of it. Go to university, well, only if you go to Melbourne and join the Molk. I'll enroll you in one subject so you can be Molk president, but otherwise, why would you want to go to these organ grinders that just take the best and brightest minds and turn you into a communist?
Yeah, no, pretty much.
Well, how do you think we got there where universities are just propaganda machines?
Oh, they got taken over by. Look, they've always been left-wing institutions, right? I mean, they were in the 60s. They certainly were in my day. I had a lot of fun at university, but that's the whole point. I had fun because I'd go to my tute, say something inflammatory, and then scuttle off. And it was a bit of sport. Yeah. I would, get chased around and spat on, and all this other stuff. It was great. I loved being the campus villain. As Molk president, you are the campus villain, but it was a left-wing institution, but at least I had the space to push the boundaries and to be a contrarian and to push back. I'm afraid that now I probably would have been expelled because I would have been fog-marched to some sort of grievance tribunal and said, you created an unsafe environment. Yeah. And that's the pernicious thing. Yeah. That's the pernicious thing. Universities are always going to be left-wing, but now and it's not just students, academics. One thing I did at the IPA quite extensively was go into bat for a bloke named Peter Ridd. He was at James Cook University in Townsville, and he got sacked effectively for questioning saying, look, the Great Barrier Reef is actually fine and climate change isn't a problem for it. And he got sacked.
Really?
So, yeah. I mean, it was a big – I actually did a podcast on that, a sort of documentary podcast, which I think is still around.
What was his job at the university?
He was a professor of physics.
Physics.
And he wasn't a right-wing ratbag or anything like that. He was actually an environmentalist. But he said, look, I'm the guy who invented the measuring equipment for the reef. I can tell you, bleaching is a natural event. Corals survive in hotter climates. They grow around Indonesia and places like that. But the problem is there's a monetary incentive because the James Cook University gets millions of dollars from the Australian government for reef science. Well, do you think they'd get that millions of dollars if they said, "Oh yeah, actually, turns out the reef's fine, nothing to see here"? They have to invent, and this is the problem with all bureaucracy. It's mission creep. Yeah. It is especially public health. If the Australian Foundation for whatever the hell went to the government and said, Australians, they like a drink, but they're generally pretty healthy. They'd lose their funding. So they have to go and say, well, Australia has a terrible drinking problem, and our studies show that it costs the economy $50 billion a year or some ridiculous figure, based off, and I've seen reports like that, based off the cost of things like hangovers, which aren't a public cost. They're a very private cost. They can be debilitating. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, what's your thoughts on the machete bin rollout and the machete van?
I think it's a great gift for the opposition. It's one of those things where people, it just crystallises the utter. It's not just incompetence. It is the fantasy land these people live in. and don't get me. And the only thing better than the idea, it's okay. What we're going to do is see all these stabbings, we're going to put bins out and all the criminals are going to turn up and throw the... It's not just that, they cost. What much do they cost a bin?
$3 million for the whole program, and it was $300,000.
$140,000 for a piece of corrugated, a piece of iron that and Jess, I've seen enough interviews with her. Again, she can carry a brief. She'll say, we're going to cut waste. What waste? Well, $50 billion on cost blowouts. I believe it's, I know these figures just from watching the interview. That's the discipline of messages. Some amount of money for cancelling the Commonwealth Games and the machine bins.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and pot plants.
And $200,000 for pot plants.
And not even to buy them, to rent them.
What?
Just ridiculous,
But the pot plants are rented.
Yeah, they're rented pot plants.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I didn't know.
That changes everything.
I'll tell you what, I've missed my calling. I should have gone into the pot plant rental industry.
There has to be corruption there.
Well, look, who knows? And, you'd think we'd have an Auditor General who would uncover that and all sorts of other things. But what I will say is somebody's doing very well off that contract.
Yeah.
Again, it's and it just pushes up the price for good, honest people who want to rent pot plants at a reasonable rate. And next time I go to rent a pot plant, I'm going to have to pay premium because of this government crowding out the industry.
That's one of the reasons we've got the housing crisis.
Yeah?
Because all the big builds
yes,
occupying all these builders who would otherwise be building houses.
Yes, and paying them far in excess.
Yeah.
We all know the story about I think I was one of the first people to uncover a stat like that. Like the lollipop guy costs, makes more than I do, certainly. And look, fair days work for a fair days page, but that is not fair, especially if your money is coming from the taxpayer.
Yeah.
Especially if you are effectively stealing other people's money to pay generous wages for people who, the market would not reward in that way if it was left to the free market.
Yep.
But, again, and we all pay, as you said, George, is through housing costs, the cost of building a bloody home. Yeah.
Which we need plenty of at the moment.
What do you think is the solution to the housing crisis? Do we have to curb demand and stop with the uncontrolled mass migration wave, or do we have to?
I think that's
supply?
a factor. And look, let's start with migration because I want to put out some markers because, look, I've always believed actually in a big Australia. I'm a populate or perish guy. I think we are an enormous country with 25, 27 million odd people on it. We are actually underpopulated, if anything. And the problem is, though, the governments have done such a terrible job at preparing us for that big Australia. It's because a few decades ago, somebody decided we didn't need more roads, we needed more bike paths. We didn't need more houses, we couldn't release land in the suburbs, we needed to just stack people on top of each other. We didn't need more coal power plants, we needed more windmills. So now the strain on our infrastructure and amenity of life is such that we actually do need to cut migration. And it's very sad because not only do I believe that we could probably, if we got our act together, support more people than we do now. And our birth rate needs to come up as well. We don't just want to import the population. We want to make it cheaper for people to have kids because that's why people aren't. And because people aren't happy people have children. Increasingly Australia is a joyless, miserable, expensive, annoying, rule-ridden, corona-destroyed place.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we need to turn the tap off. And also the numbers now are getting pretty absurd. Like, what is it, half a million people?
Yeah.
What's that every year?
Each year, yeah.
You cannot sustain that, right? So it's too much. But also, look, I think migration has been good for Australia. I know this probably puts me at odds with a lot of people on the edges of the right where I hang out, but I love the fact that you can go down to Victoria Street, Richmond, and enjoy Vietnamese food as good as you get in Vietnam. I mean, it's all food related for me. The way to multicultural or the way to cultural diversity for me is through my stomach. But I love that. I love that we live in an interesting country. Anthony Bourdain came to Melbourne a few years ago, the late great Anthony Bourdain, and said this is one of the best food cities in the world. I don't want to lose that. But at the same time, I want my kid to be able to afford a house or go to if he goes to university, which I don't recommend, and be in a class where people speak the same language and he doesn't get lumped with some group project where he has to do all the work. That's a serious issue. Yeah. Because international students are a cash cow for the universities because Rudd in his infinite wisdom cut full fee places and robbed them of that funding source.
It's the second biggest export. Is education.
Yeah. Well, no, but it's a fast track to a visa. It's not genuine education in a lot of cases. It's a visa scam a lot of the time. The other thing is this. People, I think, will support migration and Australians are extremely tolerant people. But at these levels, people will start to resent it. And that is a problem. That is a problem. Because then you really do get disharmony and people turning on each other. And the Australian compact starts to erode. So demand factors are a thing, but also supply factors. It should not cost as much to build a house. It should not wait as long as you do for planning to be approved. There's a woman I work with. She's been trying to build a fence on her property for months. This has gone on. I listened to her on the phone to the bloody to Stonington Council, haranguing them about this fence. You have no idea the paperwork that she has had to go through, the number of people she's had to speak to for a fence. God knows how much it is to build a house. So. Yeah, it's a serious issue, housing, and it's not fair, and again, it fuels resentment, and that only ends up in ugly places. But I understand where people are coming from. I do. I remember house hunting; it was bloody awful. I went to one auction. It was like a Metallica concert. There were so many people lined up outside.
Yeah. And I just hate the idea of a 30-year mortgage. It feels like a prison sentence.
Well, I mean, everything in life's a prison sentence when you get to my age, mate. Look, if you could lock it in though, like you can in the US, I believe, at a low rate, it's pretty good. Yeah,
Would you see Trump's idea of the 50-year mortgage? What do you think of that?
Even better. 50 years to pay off a house. Look, bottom line is though, houses should be. It shouldn't take you 50 years to pay your house off. You should be earning a wage that's decent, and the house should be affordable. Because if your whole life is paying off your house, what chance do you have of building actual wealth? Buying investments. This is the thing. This may very well be why the Liberal Party's on the nose and isn't polling all that well, because there aren't conservatives left. Because there's nothing to conserve. People don't. Not only do they not own their own home, again, they're not building wealth. They just see themselves as being on this instant hamster wheel, paying rent, paying tax. There is an understandable impulse when you're working so hard and how you have little to show for it. Yeah, you do get the urge to burn it down, whether that's the socialist way or the Nick Fuentes crazy, go crazy and, trash the place way.
But I would say that burn the place down isn't a fringe view. I mean, Trump is a anti-establishment guy himself. He came in saying we're going to gut the Washington establishment.
Well, that's music to my ears. I mean, there's a difference between taking issue with the size and scope of government and the corrupt, incestuous, greedy, overbearing, disgusting entity that the 21st century nation state has become, and wanting to burn down your country and tear down its institution, its cultural institutions, its symbology, statues. Wanting to ban Australia, scrap Australia Day, or saying that Captain Cook doesn't matter because he was just a racist, or all that kind of garbage. There's a difference between rejecting your country and rejecting its government.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the overbearing government is now teaching people in a lot of ways to resent your country, like through the curriculum, through the narratives on public broadcasters. The idea we're all just on stolen land, this is all illegitimate, that Australia is not a worthwhile thing to celebrate. Bloody, of course it is something to celebrate. 200 years, we've built this glittering country, strong, democratic, harmonious, yes, incorporating people from all around the world, and bequeathed a great culture where, nobody cares who you are or where you came from as long as you're a good guy. As long as you help out and have a good sense of humour and don't take yourself too seriously and pay your own way. That's something worth preserving, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
But again, this is why there might not be Liberal voters anymore, because we are just generations upon generations just getting brainwashed.
So you don't reckon we have enough patriotism or just love our country
I don't think we're telling
anymore?
the truth.
Yeah.
I don't think, and look, read if you haven't read. Speaking of Tony Abbott, his Australian history book.
Yeah, I have it in the other room there.
It is so good. It is like, and he doesn't. Even the Guardian wrote a positive review saying, look, he actually does confront mistakes that were made, terrible things that were done to Indigenous people. They're not as black and white, pardon the pun, as it was made out on campus or in high school or things like that. But you confront it. But overwhelmingly, this country's good way outweighs its bad. And so we need to tell the truth about ourselves. And again, we are at a very precarious time. The West is staring down the barrel of some very bad actors. Do you think in China they're telling their kids, maybe they should, we put Uyghur Muslims in a concentration camp, we're terrible? Do you think in Russia they're telling their kids, this country's run by oligarchs, it's awful and terrible? No. You cannot, if there's a war, who's going to join the bloody army? Who's going to fight for this country? If they
I think as well is like this was all 200 years ago or whatever.
Well, yeah, there's an element of that too. And people will say, and you have to remember, because people will say to me in the next breath, what about the Holocaust and things like that?
Yeah.
But I'll be the first to say, look, we should always remember the Holocaust, as we should always remember the Mile Creek Massacre or any of the other, or the demise of the Aboriginal population of Tasmania and so on. We should always remember those things, but we should not be personally saddled with that guilt. And I'll be the first person to say, I think a lot of German war guilt in the year 2025 is a little bit counterproductive. I think I think most people from that era are dead or about to die. I think again, there's a difference between remembering something and saddling present day people who had nothing to do with the guilt. And I don't think Australian school children should be made to feel guilty for their country. It is just, again, there's no reason to be, firstly, because, again, the good outweighs the bad. We have a lot to be proud of. And, look, to the extent Australia isn't what it used to be, we've been let down by some bad governments, but we should still remember that this is still a wonderful place, and I just want it to be the best it can be.
How do you think it got that way? Was it the rise of wokeism, or was it a particular prime minister? How do you think we became this? Because I felt like during John Howard was like peak patriotism.
Yeah, I think there was. Look, I think lately, I think Corona showed us how big and how nasty and how terrible the government can be. I mean, that was really, I guess, a turning point for me insofar as every paranoid libertarian nightmare that I've ever entertained came true. The public health complex, I was always the first to say, once they ban smoking in pubs, they're not going to stop until they control every area of your life. Like, Rozner, you lunatic. What do you think the public health sectors are? Well, it turns out they're pretty damn nasty if they get their way. Being kept under house arrest for 23 hours a day, internal borders going up in our country. Again, Australian citizens being locked out of their own country.
Out of Metro Melbourne. It was a ring of steel.
There were, I remember around the holidays, they closed the borders to Victoria and people had gone on holiday with their camper vans and so on. They were camped on the border. We had internally displaced people in Australia. In Australia, we had DPs.
People couldn't go to their immediate family's funeral. I remember that.
A baby died because they couldn't hop the border to go to a hospital. And Anastasia Palaszczuk, well, we're Queensland hospitals are for Queenslanders. Awful. Awful. So Corona, I think, changed a lot of things. I think it showed us that we can be quite a narky country. And I had to say it, I think Australian people are some of the best people in the world, but we did not cover ourselves in glory during those years. Those Dobbin hotlines that were flooded with calls, people turning on each other.
Yeah. Well, the government was encouraging people to snitch on their own neighbours. Disgusting.
Yes, and they manipulated people through fear. You know, growing up, as I'm sure you have, Lockie, we always ask ourselves, you know, how did so many Germans go along with the Holocaust? How did they surely they knew, how did they get so nasty? Now I know, not that Corona was anything as dramatic as the Holocaust. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that when people are scared, they become very, very unkind to each other. And they can be manipulated by governments pushing a narrative of fear and paranoia. And the way our governments did it and the way people fell for it, it was I guess, a formative time.
What do you think of Dan Andrews? Obviously, he's like one of the best political operators we've ever seen. But yeah, what are your thoughts on him?
Look, he was always somebody I admired in a way. I hated his politics because he was always left-wing and
socialist
very dangerous. But I admired the fact that he was such a good practitioner of politics. He was cunning as a shithouse rat, right? And again, you can't help but admire somebody so shameless, right? But, you know, Corona happened and, I mean, then he just became one of the greatest villains in the history of Australia. Really and truly, one of the cruelest, most underhanded. The number of lives he ruined, the way he lied and twisted obfuscated those ridiculous theatrical press conferences of his to glorify himself. The way he turned us against each other and I mean, you know, and I was at the IPA. I was basically the first person. We were the first organisation to reject lockdown. So I got flooded with people with the word, you know, paraplegics who said, "I've lost my one outing left. I have nothing else to live for." The people whose kids were completely screwed up, who'll never be the same.
A whole generation.
The suicides. You know, I met somebody on the steps of Parliament House. They were keeping a vigil there, and there was one intellectually disabled young man, would have been, I don't know, 17, 18. He tried to kill himself twice in Corona, and by the grace of God was found both times. I mean, it was a war crime against the Australian people and the Victorian people, and by far the worst thing that the Australian government has ever done to its own people ever. So, yeah, what do I think of Dan Andrews? Look, he extremely good politician, but again, you know, and the fact that he's getting a statue, I mean, I've never been in favour of the Trots tearing down statues. However, the one exception I'll make. But yeah, anyway, and he got re-elected too. That was the worst part.
And landslides, yeah.
Yeah, again.
Can you tell us about how, you know, when during Corona you became very notorious, you got a lot of international media coverage, how you dealt with all that? Yeah,
well, again, look, so what happened was I was at the IPA. I was their director of policy. I was, we were shut down like everybody else, and I was at home in my apartment, and I was living in Spencer Street at the time, and I had my hour of permitted yard time, and I went out for a walk just around the CBD, and I mean, I'm not sure if you've ever seen the movie I Am Nation with Will Smith, where he's the last guy on earth. It was like that. It was just to see Collins Street like completely empty was eerie. But more to the point, I noticed every store I used to like, every pub I went to, every restaurant I had, all boarded up, and thinking, how many of these will survive, whatever this is? How many of these will shut forever? And a lot of them did. And I came back to my apartment just morbidly depressed, like seriously down about what was happening. And at that point, John Roscombe called me and said, "How are you holding up?" I said, "Oh, you know, I've been better, John. This is pretty lousy, isn't it? You know, big government." He said, "Look," and this was in early April, right? So it was like when it really was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. It was that early. And John said to me, "Look, we're thinking about doing something really out there." So that's how early it was, and really crazy, but we're thinking about it coming out against this lockdown. And I said, "Oh, John, thank God. Can I please be the face of it?" He said, "I was hoping you would, because you're the only prick crazy enough to actually do it." So anyway, we went down to Hardware Lane, I think it was, where the or Collins Place, I think, whatever it was, where the IPA office was. I filmed a 30-second piece to camera. We put it out. Didn't think much more of it. But then I was just flooded with hate from on Twitter. Like, the worst one was the actor Sam Neill. You know, this actor Sam from Jurassic Park and a few other things. Somebody I really admire. Love his work. Love his acting. And even he said, "You're a clown in a suit. Sit down and shut up." But at the same time, I was telling you, I had this, that was in the paraplegic email and all these other, like I got flooded with private messages saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. I've been waiting for somebody to say it. So, look, it was a great evil. I could see it early on. I didn't know how bad it would get. But I tell you when I crossed the line from saying, oh my God, this is government overreach to, no, this is evil. This is government inflicting evil on its citizens. When I turned on the news and I saw the Centrelink offices. Do you remember that footage?
Yeah.
Centrelink offices with people
Around the
lining
corner.
up for miles and miles and miles. I thought, what have we done?
Yeah.
What have we done? That is, there's nothing worse than taking somebody's job.
Yeah.
Somebody's job, their livelihood, their ability to put a roof over their family's head with the stroke of a pen, gone. You know, admittedly, they compensated them by printing money and screwing, you know, the next 10 generations of Australians. But at that point, I'm thinking, what are we dealing with here over an illness? So anyway, so to answer your question, I became, I guess, one of the most prominent voices, and I was joined by others soon. You know, it was a bit of a domino effect because once I came out, David Limbrick was the next Libertarian upper house MP who was. He almost became the de facto opposition leader in Victoria. I mean, Mobby I love, and he did a great job, and I think it's actually sad that he never made it to an election. I think he should have been given a go, but he didn't. Look, let's face facts. He didn't reject the corona thing outright. He argued against the excess of it, which is fine. That's, you know, you can understand why that was, but David Limbrick was full-throated. So there was David Limbrick, then there was Rowan Bean from Sky, and then Peter Credlin, and then, you know, a few others. So there was a solid crew, but I guess I was the first, and that's because of the IPA. I don't take credit for that. That was what the IPA did at its best and does at its best. You know, lean into controversy, not because it's for controversy's sake, but because it's the right thing to do, and because it's just, and because nobody else is saying it. So, and yeah, international coverage. You know, it's funny. I used to do. It's not on Foxtel anymore. It was at the time. But RT, Russia Today, the Russian state propaganda channel, they call me up and say, oh, do you want to do an interview for a Moscow audience? I'm like, yeah, why not? And one of my RPA colleagues said, look, you know, do Tucker and all these other things, but Russia, I mean, really, you know, they just want to make Australia look bad. And I said, Australia deserves to look bad. Good. Let the point be made that when the Russians are interviewing me because they are concerned about Australian authoritarianism, something has gone very wrong. So, you know, yeah, let's take notice of that. So I did that. I did US again. I did Tucker back when he was normal and people liked him. I wasn't a complete nut. You know, you can't. You know, but at the time it felt like it was the peak and pinnacle of my career. Like, oh, on Tucker's show, like the most watched.
It was also his cultural significance in the Republican Party of Russia. Freudian slip.
Freudian slip if ever I've heard one.
Yeah. But like Tucker's monologue at whatever, 7 p.m. or whenever he had it would like influence the conversation. Like,
because it was normal. It was still, you know, it wasn't these weirdos who he's getting on his podcast now. Like, was Hitler really a bad guy? Well, and look, he's right to ask those questions. You know, it's like, there was a Joe Rogan episode with Douglas Murray and that Dave Smith dickhead, right? And Douglas Murray, I thought, he didn't make the best case because he said at one point, look, with history, you should listen to the historians and people like that. No. We don't do listening to the experts. The experts have their head up their, you know, proverbial as much as anybody else. It's not that, but when you're getting to the point of saying, well, look, was Winston Churchill all that much of a hero? And maybe Hitler, like, you just dabbling in ahistorical crap at that stage. I'm all for asking questions, but, you know, I could ask if the sky is red if I wanted to. It doesn't make it a particularly sensible or worthy question to discuss and debate. So, yeah.
So you're not a Dave Smith fan. I find that interesting.
So I don't know much about him other than he's just, you know, he wasn't particularly funny, and he is into this, you know, Palestine stuff.
Yeah, he's a nut, but, you know, you're both Jewish libertarians, so I thought there could be something there.
Well, yeah, you know, I guess so, but you know, not all libertarians have been great on that issue. But I guess, look, it's not really a libertarian or not issue. It's a foreign policy issue, and look, some people like Jihad John Ruddick have fallen on the wrong side of that.
Jihad John, that's good.
Jihad John. Look, and I'll say that I like John a lot. He's always been a mate of mine. I have a theory in politics. Everybody's got an amnesty for at least one issue that they can be completely terrible on. So if Jihad John wants to line up with the jihadis and the blue-head freaks, I mean, you know, all the power to him. That's fine. He's got his one issue. But
that's a good principle to have.
Yeah, look,
I think John walking down the Sydney Harbour Bridge with that tiny Australian flag, just
like that was the stupidest thing. Like, dude, either take a big flag and tell them why you're carrying it, or don't go. But it just goes to show, like, yeah, Australia, hooray! They chuck him off the bridge because this is what people don't get. They hate Australia too because it's another genocidal, illegitimate, colonial, whatever the hell. But all right. Yeah, okay, but it's still here in the here and now. It's still a pretty good place. Same with Israel. It was created in accordance with international law of the time. Both countries have been built up from the desert against the odds, and both are tolerant liberal democracies. Anyway,
it's a bit of an internal debate, but do you think it's appropriate to have a Palestinian flag at Invasion Day protests?
They could have the flag of whatever country they want. I mean, the whole protest is stupid. Get every damn. But again, that just proves my point, which is this ahistorical, misguided, pseudo academic nihilism, which is just it's all colonialism. Let's tear it all down. It's all shameful. Let's just get rid of it all. It's certainly not helpful to everyday people, but. Unfortunately, we're just churning out more and more of those people. And people are buying it because, again, everybody's broke. Nobody has any money. Everybody's unhappy. So they reach for crazy shit. It's just always been the way it is. Part of the reason why the right is fragmenting in the US and here. Because in tough economic times, the centre, liberalism and social democracy, they fall out of favour pretty quickly. People gravitate towards the edges. They reach for something radical because... the standard version isn't doing it for them. They want the hard stuff. They want to try to shake things up. And yeah, there is the impulse to burn things down for its own sake. People say, well, it's not very good for our democracy. Well, what's our democracy done for me? People say. All of this stuff is a byproduct of, I think it was Joe Hildebrand who once said almost every social problem, and I would add political problem, can be traced back to poverty and living standards. And that's absolutely true. You unleash. It's a terrible thing what we've done to create a situation in which well-heeled insiders are doing well, in which the government is printing money that allows people with assets to borrow cheaply against it and buy even more assets. I'm not a socialist by any means, but I do think that I don't have to qualify that. I'm not a socialist. In fact, socialists are getting it wrong. It's not because of capitalism that people are broke and miserable. It's actually, we don't have capitalism in any real sense. We have crony capitalism, and that's a very different proposition.
Yeah.
And I worked as a staffer. I know what happens. These stakeholders walk up and down the blue carpet with their lanyards on saying, well, say there's a big store that makes bicycles or something, right? And they want to squeeze out their small competitors. Well, all they need to do is go up to the minister and say, look, minister, we think that small unlicensed bike sellers are causing safety problems. So we should have a bike safety compliance scheme. Oh, okay, that sounds good. Well, the big bike shop has a legal department and compliance officers. They can actually afford it. The small people can't. They get squeezed out.
Yeah, well, it was like Patrick Irwin was saying on our first episode, big business is becoming indistinguishable from government.
Yes, exactly. Because increasingly big business, they don't subsist on making their shareholders richer or their customers more satisfied or their workers better paid. They subsist on government handouts, government contracts, cosy regulations. And they curry favour by attaching themselves to these stupid causes that very few like. I was the other day. I was at the ANZ headquarters. I was meeting a potential client there, and they still had the thing they wheel out every Pride, this gay TM, right? It's an ANZ ATM, GAY gay TM. I'm thinking to myself, I mean, it's annoying and stupid for me, but like, do any gay people see that and think, I'm going to bank with the ANZ? They care about me. I don't think even gay people, I can't speak from experience, but I don't think they'd want to be pandered to in that way. Yeah. But I'm sure the Minister for Diversity thinks, well, that's wonderful initiative. Like, again, we need to get back to the stage when businesses should do three things and three things only. Maximise their value for shareholders, maximise their value for consumers, and maximise the wages of workers. And all three can be done. Yeah. And I think businesses will be a lot more popular if they do that than if they if they say, well, we support Black Lives Matter or some kind of damn thing. Like, You're a bloody airline, you know. I don't need a welcome to country when I land. What are they acknowledging the traditional owners of the airline, Boeing?
So they say put the fries in the bag.
Huh?
Have you ever heard the saying put the fries in the bag?
No.
Like when someone's like yapping to you, you just tell them just put the fries in the bag.
Is that a Gen Z thing?
Yeah,
is that like a 6-7 type thing?
Yeah.
I'm getting old, friend. I'm 2 years off 40, you know.
You're 2 years off 40. Wow.
Yeah.
You look good for your age, Gideon.
Thank you, my friend. Oh, I've got to come do this show more often. This is great fun. Anyway, yeah.
We have an org chart, and I think one of my responsibilities is people management, isn't it?
Yeah,
or guest management.
I've pretty much got everything on the org chart.
Good. Well, you've set up this whole glittering studio and poor old Lockie's house. I remember my house used to be the base of operations for Malcolm as well back in the day. So, yeah, it was a great time when I lived at home. And then Spencer Street was the headquarters for the YLs. You're getting me nostalgic. How is the club going?
Club's going well, very strong. Well, you would have seen it annual dinner, just how
so
good
much
it was.
Fun. Oh my god, that was a fun night. I was like a pig in shit that night. Just going back to that time of my life. It's a very enjoy it. It's a very special thing.
Yeah, well, biggest annual dinner we've ever had, and I think we beat your record. Was it?
Did I have a record?
Yeah, didn't you? Have,
was yours a previous record? Was it?
I think Gideon's.
Sounds about right. I put on a good one. Alexander Downer, who brought the house down.
Oh yeah.
And it was at the ANZ Pavilion at the Arts Centre.
Oh, sounds lovely.
I put on a good show back in the day, as you have to.
But how's it like having your VP as Senator Patterson and seeing everything he's done?
Well, he was always a big talent. From at age 18. I wasn't the best debater. I was a great drinker and a great, and that's, in fact, Patterson and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying, we sat down in our second year. Everybody assumed there'd be a rivalry, but he actually said to me, "Look, I want to support you as vice president. You have the skills of what it takes to be a malt president. You put your arm around the first years, buy him a drink, put on events." He was always the brains behind the operation. I was the goofy front man guy. But ever since, he could get up at a mock meeting and just speak like he was already a politician. He was already always destined for great things. But having him as now, it's sort of taken for granted. Like I'm just used to the fact that that's my mate, the senator, on TV or on the front page of the Oz. But when he won, he was 29 years old when he went for pre-selection and became the youngest ever Liberal Party senator. And when he won, it was like the fall of the Berlin Wall. I mean, we were all so happy that our mate had become was the top of the Senate ticket and was sure and he was filling a casual vacancy. So he was in Parliament like a week later making his maiden speech. So look, he's just been amazing. A lot of people from my time have done great things. Jess, we've talked about. Evan Mulholland is just a gun.
Yeah.
Who else is rattling around? Oh, Max Williams just got pre-selected for Rowville, so that'll be fun. Go back to the Outer East to hand out vote cards for the first time since my young Liberal days. So, he's all guns blazing. So, but Patterson was always going places.
Yeah,
and he'll be a great upper house leader and minister in the government.
Yeah, it's funny that you knew back then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For the first year, we both thought we were top shit too. 18, we'd already been around politics. He was in the Young Liberals. I'd already joined, as I said. We both thought we were something. And, we became very fast friends very quickly. So, yeah.
Where do you think the future of the Liberal Party is, particularly federally?
Yeah.
Where it's, things are looking a bit grim at the moment.
They are grim. And, look, there's just no other way to cut it. The right has just fragmented. I think people have a lot more choice when it comes to parties on the right. I think Pauline presents an enormous challenge for the Liberal Party. Look, in some ways, I'll make the same point again. It's not like the Liberal Party hasn't been as opposition before. I lived through 2007. I remember the Liberal Party going into opposition. I remember the soul searching. I remember it couldn't get its act together with climate. Do we oppose it? Do we support it? Do we do this? Do we do that? My fear is that the party's problems are structural, not cyclical. And there may not be enough Liberal Party voters left anymore. And that's an issue. Where it goes from here, I think it just has to have these arguments and these fights. But are the two sides of the party, are you going to get people like Alex Antic and who's somebody on the left who I can't stand? Matt Keane in the same room together, singing from the same song sheet ever again? I don't know. Is a split viable or even desirable? I don't know. Will all the problems change if you go from Susan Ley to Andrew Hastie? I don't know. I mean, is Susan Ley even the problem? I mean, I don't think she's the most charismatic figure, but she hasn't been a complete communist either. I mean, she's begrudgingly, I guess, gone back on, or had a rewind on net zero. I don't know. Look, smarter people than I will know what the Liberal Party can do to reverse its fortunes, but this is the lowest ebb I've ever seen. And at the end of the day, what matters most of all are ideas, are the principles, are the policies. A logo or an organisation or the fact that whether it's the Liberal Party of Australia or another organisation, those things I think are surface level to what matters is that liberalism survives, and that there is an alternative to the big government woke, just throw money around like it's going out of fashion, Labor Party. And I guess if I can leave it a final thought, the Liberal Party's problem for the last few elections is that it has not done enough to provide an alternative to that. And no amount of leadership changes will fix that. That's hard policy work and a lot of hard work to sell it and to sell it to people. It's a lot harder to say fix the budget than it is have some free shit. Have your Medicare card, but we need to do that hard work. Yeah. So we will see. I hope I'm wrong. But good luck, boys, honestly.
Yeah, thanks.
And all the strength you are for what you're doing.
Thanks.
Well, thanks for coming on.
The Malk is independent from the Liberal Party too.
Malk existed before the party and it'll exist after the party.
Right on. So again, anybody who's watching this, go to Melbourne Uni, join the Malk, go to the Queensbury Hotel on a Monday. It's the best thing you'll ever do. The best. So there you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.